Hi, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of BioNexus Health Podcast Series. Today, we will be speaking about Lyme disease and possible mold exposure, along with Ehlers-Danlos complications. And we are very fortunate indeed to have with us a local father. You know, he's been a local support, a local hero for many, with establishing as well as coordinating the New Jersey Lyme support group right here in New Jersey, United States. So I would like to welcome today Douglas Khan.
Welcome to the BioNexus Health Podcast with Dr. Jodie A. Dashore, who holds a PhD in Integrative Medicine, is board certified in Integrative Pediatrics, an internationally recognized pioneering clinician, and author. And now here's your host of BioNexus Health Podcast, Dr. Jodie A. Dashore.
Thank you so much for being here, Doug. How are you?
Thank you, Dr. Dashore. I'm fine. Thanks for having me. I'm not a hero. I'm just a dad that's trying to pay a little bit forward because so many people were kind to me and helping my family get well. And you've helped me a great deal too. So thank you.
Absolutely. Shall we begin at the beginning, if that's okay? Let's,
sure.
Yeah. So your daughter was diagnosed with Lyme disease. Did you know right away that it was Lyme? And let me tell you first of all that I'm going to be interrupting you many times just so that we can get a full picture. Feel free to do the same, right? So we can get a good conversation going, and I'm sure that the more information we can share, the more it helps people. So
okay, that sounds good. To answer your question, no, we did not know our daughter had Lyme disease or co-infections, and it was a long journey. So our daughter. We tend to talk about our daughter more, but our whole family had Lyme and co-infections.
I see.
And our daughter had it the worst. She was kind of like, she was our first child. And when she got to be about 4 or 5 years old, she started always getting sick. And we'd go to the pediatrician, and she would have like an ear infection or a strep throat. And after a while, I asked the pediatrician, why is she getting sick so much? And the pediatrician just told us, well, some kids are like that. And she'd get an antibiotic and she'd get better. And then she'd get worse again. And that went on for quite some time. We did not know anything about Lyme or co-infections.
So if I may, you mentioned sore throat, strep throats. So she would have recurrent strep throats.
Oh, yeah, a lot, a lot. And it just seemed unusual because I don't remember having that as a child. And, but that's what we were dealing with. Mm. And so as time went on, that just continued and continued. And then when she was about 14, she started getting these really severe migraines and some vision distortion. And her health just seemed to really take a downturn. Yet there were still some good times. And then when she was 17, her health really crashed. And so we brought her, my wife and I brought her to an infectious disease doctor, which I would not do today, but that's what we did. That's all we knew. Right. And the doctor tested her for Lyme disease, and he told us it was negative. And I was at my wit's end.
So I'm going to interrupt you again. Sorry.
Yes.
So because I remember going through these steps myself with Brian. So the infectious disease doctor obviously ran just regular LabCorp or Quest Lyme disease test, which was negative, because I recall for Brian, with a child in a wheelchair, they ran, in fact, a Lyme disease screen and test through regular labs, And we did that 10 times, Doug, and 10 times it showed up negative. I mean, there were always bands which showed up. I had no clue. This was way back,
Right.
2008, 2009 was when we were. So is that what happened to you as well?
That's exactly what happened. Actually, our daughter was also in a wheelchair then. She was in bed for literally 4.5 years. And we went to the doctor and she was in a wheelchair, and he did tests. He told us it was negative, but there were 4 bands that were there.
Right.
And I'm a pretty conservative fellow, and I thought he knew. I said, okay, what is it then? What would you do? And this is your daughter, I said to him. What would you do? He says, I would take her to CHOP in Philly.
Okay.
And so we did that. And CHOP actually admitted our daughter. She was there for 8 days. And my wife stayed with her part of the time, and I stayed with her part of the time. We were always with her.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of those 8 days, many doctors saw her. And at the end of those 8 days, she got discharged. And they told us she has something that they called fibromyalgia. Now, I did not know what that was. And they told us, they gave us a lot of different pain medicines to give her. And they said, this is something she's going to have her whole life. She needs to learn how to manage it and deal with the pain. And my daughter was 17, and that just didn't make sense to me.
So wait a minute. So they told you she has fibromyalgia.
Correct.
And that was the reason for her being in a wheelchair.
I didn't ask that direct question, but she was in such pain, she really couldn't walk.
Right.
And so they said, you have to take this pain medicine. And what that did was it masked the pain.
Right.
And you have to learn to live with it, which as a mom and dad, my wife and I couldn't accept that.
Right.
So from there, we did some research, and my wife and I brought her down to Maryland. And we spent 3 hours with a doctor that dealt with chronic fatigue.
Right. Okay.
And he told us, after 3 hours, he says, he believes she has 2 things. One is something called Ehlers-Danlos,
Mm-hmm.
which is a collagen disorder, as you know. And the other is Lyme disease. So that's when Lyme disease came into my picture. And he said, he gave us the name of a doctor who is, use the term Lyme literate in New Jersey. And so we went to that doctor. He also told us that he believes, based on a clinical evaluation, he didn't do any blood tests, that he believes she's had Lyme since she's been about 5 or 4 years old, 4 or 5. And what we did as parents was as raising our kids, we didn't plop them in front of the TV or things like that. We went to parks. We went looking for shark's teeth in the river, running around in the yard. And I do remember ticks being pulled off, but then you just cleaned it up, and I thought that was okay.
Right.
And no one told us otherwise. So this Lyme literate doctor did a test from a company called Hygienics. And that test came back positive for Lyme and co-infections. And then, he saw the condition she was in, and he started her with allopathic type treatment, IV doxy, 400 milligrams, did that for 9 months.
Intravenously for 9 months. Okay.
9 months. I also had a nurse on call 24/7. And we would call her sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning and say, you got to come to the house. And that was just all part of the whole package. And after a while, the doctor stopped the IV after 9 months. And he tried oral antibiotics, but her gut couldn't tolerate oral antibiotics. But she still wasn't fully well. I mean, the IV helped, no doubt about it. But she wasn't whole. So she stopped that now, and we took the orals, had to stop that after a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And because the body just wouldn't tolerate it. Now, what do you do? Well, I was very fortunate in having the career I had, and my wife could stay home. I was just so blessed that. And so my wife took total care of her daughter, and they did a lot of research. And our daughter did a lot of research too. She's a very bright individual. And they did a lot of research on herbal things. And we started buying herbal tinctures. We didn't know who to talk to. This didn't seem to be in the forefront in those days.
Right.
She was 17 or so, 18. And today she's 30.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
yes, yes.
And so that we actually, the tinctures that were bought have a little bit of alcohol in them as a preservative, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was allergic to that. And so she couldn't take it. So we started making our own.
Oh, wait. Okay. So this is absolutely wonderful. So based on your own research, actually based on your daughter's research, and yes, I would agree. I've met her a few times, and she is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, such a compassionate, caring individual as well. So yeah. So she did her research into herbals, trying to get better. What you obtained were tinctures, which she became allergic to, and you decided to make your own.
Correct. We made our own. There's a lot you can learn online. There are a lot of books you can buy, but that doesn't give you the intellect that someone like you who has formal training has. So I don't recommend people do what we did. We did it out of necessity. Now you're there, and others are there that do what you do, and that just didn't exist as far as we know. And some of the things that you take as individuals, like if you take Uber Ursi, you can only. My understanding is you can only take it for a certain period of time, and then you have to back away. Or if you take valerian for a while, maybe you have to then titrate off of that slowly. So, but it would be much better to have a professional, a medical professional, such as yourself, I think, oversee that than kind of go by the seat of your pants out of necessity like we did. But we were lucky, and it helped a great deal. And then, so we did all that, and there were other things that we did. Everything we did in the aggregate helped. I don't know of one thing in itself that did it, but one of the things our daughter told us was she could smell mold in our master bathroom. Well, my wife and I couldn't smell it. And so when we would go to the bathroom, every time she would go in there, or we'd bring her there actually, she would feel sick because of the smell. So we had that bathroom completely gutted, remediated, rebuilt. And then there was a second bathroom. There is a second bathroom in our home. And I asked the contractor, is there any chance that could be here? And he says, it's possible. You can't say yes or no. I said, rip it all out, do the same thing, rebuild it, remediate, rebuild it.
Did you find the mold? Were you able to see it somewhere? You know, sometimes it is in the insulation, it's behind the shower, it's underneath the shower pan, underneath the tub, tile,
Bingo.
like where?
Bingo. He believes it came from the shower in the master bathroom, that it got under the pan. There's a pan under the tile.
Right.
He believes water leaked under that, and then it started to develop into mold or create mold. So once we got rid of that, she never was able to smell mold again, and her health started to improve again. So we kept going up a little bit on the health, improving. That worked. We also did something like, we got rid of things like, I won't mention any brands, but we got rid of chemicals, soaps that had chemicals in it, or hair things, or we didn't use any perfume, my wife then, or any aftershave. Obviously, I don't need aftershave anymore. We tried to keep it clean in the house, and that helped. Diet helped. We learned there was the importance of eating organically. And I truly believe this is critical. That a lot of what I don't know the proper terms, perhaps, but our gut health, if that is whole and allows our nutrients to be absorbed properly, and that seemed to help us. So I tell people today that if it comes in a box, it's probably not a real food. It's a food-like product. It might taste great, but I don't know what it's doing to your body. And the short term, if you eat a bag of chips, short term, you say, oh, it didn't do anything. But long term, what's the long-term effect? And how's your body react to that? And I think that's important. We also started filtering all the water that we ingest in the house. And also at that time, we were filtering showers and things like that. So, and because the skin is kind of like your largest organ, and if you're in hot water and you might absorb stuff. So she did become very chemically sensitive. Mm-hmm. And so when the furnace would come on in the wintertime, or my wife would put the stove on, she would get a rash and she would feel sick. And we didn't know what that was. And thankfully, our brother-in-law had done some research for us. And he found out that they put an additive in the natural gas, and some people are allergic to that. And so we had our furnace, our hot water heater, our gas dryer, and our stove ripped out and put all electric in. She never had a rash again or got sick when we turned anything on. So it was that additive. She had that reaction. Now today she doesn't have that. She's much better. She's not that chemically sensitive anymore. So we were very lucky to be able to do that.
Wow. So this is, I've heard from just a couple other patients about multiple chemical sensitivities to gas furnace and the additive. Now, your daughter also had sensitivities to the hot water that came from that. So you had to rip even the hot water heater out?
Well, because the hot water heater was gas.
Yes, I understand. Yes.
So when the gas heated up, when the gas ignited, it was letting off some type of burned fume that she was sensitive to.
Okay.
So anything that was gas in the house, we had removed, and we went total electric in our house.
Okay, so even the stove, she would get a rash.
Stove.
What about regular cooking?
Well, if you cooked with gas, she would get a rash, and she would go sick. Anything, yeah.
Okay.
As soon as you started putting the eye on the stove, it was gas,
Yes.
and it filtered down through the air. to her bedroom, she would start feeling sick.
Okay.
And
so there really is an additive that is added to gas for what? For winterization, for smooth flow? What did you find out?
The research that we did was that, or my brother-in-law had done, was to find out that they put something in gas that gives an odor, so that if it leaks,
right,
you know it.
Right.
And apparently that's what she was reacting to.
That is very rare. Yes, I understand what you're saying, because people with mast cell activation and multiple chemical sensitivities, they can sense even the tiniest amount of perfume. I remember my office, when I used to see patients in person, it's right in my intake paperwork. Please don't wear any kind of perfumes or aftershaves or any kind of fragrances,
Right.
that are right. Yeah. Now, I was myself diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Turns out it was Lyme, and like, just like you said, being outdoors, hiking, right, being in the woods, it was considered to be a healthy lifestyle versus just using the television as your babysitter. We had an organic farm, not the herbal farm I have now, but we had shares at another organic farm, which we used to go to. And I remember picking vegetables and the fruit and berries and seeing ticks crawling, and it was okay. You just brush them off.
Right.
That's exactly where we were at, like myself, as well as my son, who was 2.5 years of age when we started going to this farm. So I also recall, Doug, that you and I were first introduced in 2014 when you were attempting to organize the first ever New Jersey Lyme conference, along with Dr. Bransfield, New Jersey Congressman Smith, Dr. Pat Smith, myself was invited as well. And you were, you also spoke about your story. Brian spoke about his story. So that's when we first met. And that was the first time I met your daughter as well. She spoke very eloquently of her experiences, and she seemed to be on her way to recovery by then. Is that right?
Yeah, she was doing very well at that point. She wasn't fully well, but she was at a point where when she was sick, every ounce of her energy went to taking care of family. And so I didn't have time for anything else other than my career. I had to do work. And but as she got better, I wanted to do something that maybe would help somebody else. And so I thought, I'll just do an educational seminar. And I was fortunate that you agreed to come and speak, that Dr. Bransfield came and spoke, and he was the president of ILADS at the time. Congressman Chris Smith, he agreed to speak. He was very kind. And so out of that, we had about 250 people showed up. And so then we, it was at the church that my wife and I attended. And after that meeting, they called the pastor and they said, would you start a Lyme support group? And he called me and I said, sure, I'll do it, not knowing what I'm getting into. For better or for worse, I don't know, but they have almost 1,600 people now in the group. And we used to meet monthly. We no longer meet at the church. We started meeting at Homedale Public Library. And then with COVID around, I didn't feel comfortable bringing people together. So we have Zoom meetings. Mm-hmm. And we don't give any medical advice. We don't have that training. We do have doctors such as yourself come and talk. I know you've spoken several times, and thank you. But we just are there so that people don't feel like my wife and I felt, where, oh, you're in your house, you don't know somebody that's going through this. Where do you turn? You can talk to somebody if you choose to. You can share information with them, and you can learn. And hopefully, we're all encouraging each other. And just the key is that there's hope, because if someone loses hope, I think that's a dark place to be. And so that's all we're trying to do. And we respect everybody. We have patients in the group, people that have Lyme. We have caregivers in the group. We have medical professionals in the group. And it's been nice. I mean, I'm sorry that almost 1,600 people feel the need to be there. But I've made some very, really good friendships. And everybody seems to be, when you go through this, you seem to develop a tremendous amount of empathy for others. So it's been an interesting experience. And
I'll bet. It sounds, I've been to a few events in your group. I've also spoken a few times, and it's been a very rewarding experience each time. I mean, the people who come there are very supportive of each other. That is what's needed, Doug. I mean, I see patients from 73 countries now.
wow.
And it is mind-boggling how pervasive Lyme disease, co-infections, pandas, autism, mold biotoxin illness, it's all over the world. And there are some countries that can't really do much about it. There are some countries in Southeast Asia that I see patients from where, unfortunately, every monsoon season, the building materials are such that water seeps right through.
Right.
And, they'll be doing okay. And then as soon as it starts to go into the monsoons, that's it. The health declines for a few months. They're unable to do anything. It's just the awareness wasn't there. People think of mold as allergies. And for many, many people, it's not just allergies. It can turn into something far worse than that. It can turn into an immune dysfunction.
Yes.
So a chronic inflammation, right? As I'm sure you're aware, that mold biotoxin illness is also known as chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Yeah. So that's what happens to approximately 1 in 4 people who studies have shown that they can be genetically susceptible to mold exposure. And everyone responds well to treatment, but it is very heartwarming that people who have lived through this, Lyme, co-infections, mold, other comorbid issues, go and like to pay it forward, just like you are. Many parents of children on the spectrum in my practice who have recovered, who are no longer considered to be autistic, they start support groups on social media, on WhatsApp, now Telegram, and they're helping other parents find some answers. So that's just such a wonderful way to express your gratitude to the universe.
Well, I just hope it has helped some folks, and we've done. I think we've done a fair amount. I think it's important. This is just my own belief. I think it's important that when people approach a physician, that they work in partnership with that physician. I'm not an advocate of, like, if you go to a physician and you have, I don't know, a broken bone, you expect that doctor then to set it and you're going to heal. But with something like Lyme, you're in the doctor's office for whatever period of time, and then you have to partner with that doctor. When you get home, I think it's important then to make sure your environment is peaceful, it's clean, that you're eating right, Because otherwise, if you don't do that, if one doesn't do that, then all the efforts that the doctor is doing when they're seeing you is being countered. I think it's important to try to stay away from the chemicals, minimize EMFs in your home, things like that. And then all these things together can help one get whole. We also did RIFE, R-I-F-E. I believe in that totally. And it's either that or a heck of a placebo effect, but it helped our family a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
We're fortunate. Our daughter does have Ehlers-Danlos. I probably don't know enough about it, but I believe it's a genetic illness that she had that was in its Pandora's box. And then when her immune system weakened, it came out of that box, and you can't really get it back in. But we've been able to manage it very well. And so she's 30 today. Now, remember, I said she was in bed 4.5 years.
Yes. She's
graduated college. She's married. She has an 18-month-old beautiful son. And life is going very well. So there is a lot of hope. But it takes an individual taking personal responsibility and then partnering with the medical professionals, I think, to get well.
That is a very important point that you raised, that it is a person's lifestyle that needs to change, not just popping pills or taking medications. And in your case, you also tried herbals. For us, as you may be aware, we had a similar story, right? Trying to save Brian's life, we had to go allopathic, and then the gut exploded in spite of our best efforts at gut support. That's when I was very fortunate way back then to meet Stephen Buhner. Yes. At one of his lectures, and his partner, agreed to take us on as clients, and I've mentored with her for many years as she helped our family. So that's how I transitioned from allopathic to herbal, and then established my own herbals, because the kind of blends I was looking for, just like you, when you started making your own, it was kind of similar to that. It's instead of having like 42 bottles, I wanted like maybe 6-7 herbs in one blend. And then I found that, I have this knowledge of Ayurvedic. So why don't I try blending Western herbals along with the Eastern Ayurvedic medicinals? And it just created some really fantastic blends. And that's what we used for Brian. So
nice, it worked. And you did a great service recently for folks. You wrote a book. I think you call it a BioNexus approach to biotoxin illness. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So if anybody was interested, that would be a great book, I think, as a resource for people. I just believe in the herbal stuff. It's more natural. And for us, it worked. So it might not work for another person, but for us, it worked. So I can only share my story.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you did. And, like I said, you raised a lot of important points that, especially when you mention it needs to be a collaborative relationship with your physician, versus the conservative sort of, dictatorial type of relationship that, okay, this is what you do. I'm your doctor, do this, and you'll be cured. But the nature of Lyme disease and co-infections is such that treatment alone isn't enough, because it affects so many other systems in your body. And yes, organic food, non-processed, non-GMO, home-cooked meals.
Yes. It is very time-consuming.
Yes.
It's very time-consuming, but when you lose your health, then you realize how important it is. Before that, you take it for granted, and but you'll never take it for granted again. And once somebody learns about, the things that go into foods, and how they're genetically modified, the chemicals that are used, and what the effects of those chemicals are. And it might not be have it today and then you have that effect tomorrow, but if you have that chemical in your body day after day after day, 10 years, 20 years down the road, it may do something you might not want. So and that goes, I even made mistakes along the way. Like I thought, organic chips might be good. And I bought organic chips, and then I found out, for me, when I would get a test on my inflammation, it went up, skyrocketed. So, again, it gets back to, if it comes in a box, it's not good. And so we do spend a lot more time in the kitchen. And that's, and people think, eating organically is expensive. And perhaps it's more expensive than buying the cheapest in the market. But in the aggregate of what expenses are, if you're paying for medical treatment, it's quite a bargain to eat organically.
I would certainly agree with that. When you are making home-cooked meals, when you have a clean environment, when you've cleaned up VOCs, when you've cleaned up toxins in the environment as well, and then you go ahead and you make food, real food from scratch, takes time. I don't think organic fresh produce is that much more marked up than conventional produce. It is the processed foods, even if they are organic, they're not necessarily good for you. They actually put, whatever, potatoes and avocado oil, for example, but it's still oil.
Right.
It's probably refined because they are deep frying something. And that's enough said. You're eating something deep fried in refined oil. So if you're not wasting money with organic packaged goods, and if it is fresh, homemade, whatever snacks you want to make, you can make them at home. I think it's pretty close to conventional. I don't see, especially if you join community sustained agriculture, if you purchase shares, right? If you have farm boxes coming to your door, if you eat in season, whatever comes in your farm box. I actually have 2 farm boxes which come home, and you just confine your weekly diet to what's available in that farm box, right? Other than some rice and lentils, that's different on the side. Yeah, so it does make a big difference. What 100%. Do you, right? So what do you eat for snacks?
You're gonna laugh, but we get walnuts, almonds, pecans, and we mix in something called craisins or raisins with that. And that's our biggest snack. Or we just eat fruit. Right. And if people do that, they will find their body functions much better. They won't need a medicine to help them have a bowel movement. I don't mean to be graphic, but and it's just proof to me that those are natural things that the body knows what to do with. And instead of turning something artificial into fat because it doesn't know what to do with it. And I don't know. I've just been very fortunate that my wife has been able to be here and do a lot and research a lot. My daughter has done a lot, and I'm lucky to have had a good job. I'm retired now, but I had a good job, And so our whole family has had Lyme. Our daughter was diagnosed first. I was second. I started getting pains in my shoulders. And my daughter said, "Dad, that's how I started." So I went and had an IGeneX test, and it came back as, I think the word was equivocal. So I agreed to be treated. And then I said, okay, if I possibly have it and my daughter has it, test my wife and my son. They both came back positive for Lyme and co-infections. And so they got treated. But on them, it got caught very early. So it was much easier to treat. So I think, now hopefully people will be treated earlier, and things won't be said like it was said to my daughter when she was 17 by one physician. Physician said to her, "Oh, you're just a pretty girl. You want attention." And that was so far from the truth. No 17-year-old wants to be in bed all the time. They want to be out with their friends having fun. And so anyway.
So she heard that too. That really irks me a lot. This is what my 6.5-year-old in a wheelchair was told as well. I mean, they didn't tell him, but I was called aside. And this infectious disease physician tells me that you think he's doing it for attention. I'm like, really? He loves gymnastics, loves baseball, can't do any of those things. He's stuck in a wheelchair, excruciating pain all day, can't even turn in bed. I'm carrying him on my back up and down the stairs. Really?
It's interesting you said that, because that's exactly what I had to do. I had to put my daughter on my back and carry her. I've never heard anybody else say that. Thank you for sharing that. But you've gotten your son very well, and we're fortunate to have gotten our daughter quite whole, and now have a grandson.
Yes, congratulations. Yes, I've seen his the photographs on social media, and it's just absolutely adorable. And you are in absolute heaven when you're with him, aren't you? You just look at peace, happy, joyful.
It's the best retirement I could have. It's I see things in my grandson that I did not see in my son or my daughter, and I think that's because I was up very early in the morning, and maybe I get home at 6:30 or 7 at night, and I was tired. But now I have all the time in the world. And so I probably bragged too much about him.
So spoken like a true first-time granddad.
That's okay.
Well, listen. So it's been illuminating and educational for myself, and I'm sure it's been the same for many watching this episode today. So I truly appreciate you taking the time to join me in sharing your journey.
I'm glad to be able to do it. Thank you for having me do this, and I hope it encourages somebody. And if anybody wants to join the Lyme support group, they can do that on Facebook. And if they don't want to, that's fine too. But it's there if you folks want to. So you've been wonderful, and I appreciate all your help. You've been kind enough to give me some advice over the years. As I said, my daughter was allergic to something. What should I do? And you've been kind enough to share your expertise with me.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. So that brings us to the conclusion of this episode of BioNexus Health Podcast. I hope to see you at the next episode. I hope to see you guys next time as well. Until then, namaste.
Thank you for joining Master Herbalist Dr. Jodie A. Dashore, Director of the BioNexus Health Clinic and BioNexus Herbals, on the BioNexus Health Podcast, where we explore and share information and stories about recovering and healing from chronic and environmental illnesses such as mold biotoxin illness, Lyme disease, autism spectrum disorder, fatigue, Crohn's and colitis, mast cell activation syndrome, PANS, and more. Please help us grow our message by subscribing to our podcast channel and sharing the podcast on your social networks. For more information, visit bionexushealth.com.
Information within this video, audio, or text, collectively known as the podcast, has not been reviewed by the FDA. Nothing within the podcast is intended as or should be construed as medical advice. Information is for general informational and educational purposes only. Consumers of the podcast should consult with their healthcare practitioners for medical recommendations. Seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider. Do not disregard the advice of a healthcare provider based on any information from the podcast. The information within the podcast may contain information concerning dietary supplements or over-the-counter products that are not drugs. Our dietary supplement products are not intended for use as a means to cure, treat, prevent, diagnose, or mitigate any disease or other medical or abnormal condition.